Peter Tatchell, thank you for talking to me. In the past, you've been quite critical of the institution of marriage. So why has marriage equality become quite an important issue to you?
I think there are two issues at stake. First of all, there's what each of us feels personally about marriage as an institution. And to be honest, I would not want to get married. I share the feminist critique. I don't like the sexist patriarchal history that goes with marriage. Originally marriage was not about love, it was about property, about women as property of men and the passing of property from father to son. Obviously it has evolved and is not quite as bad as it once was, but still there are residues with the tradition of the father of the bride giving away his daughter to the husband-to-be, symbolizing the passing of women from one man to another. And also just the term husband, it's an alternative meaning for husband is to manage and control, which sort of, symbolizes the way in which many men traditionally treated women in marriages. So I personally wouldn't want to get married. I've argued long for a completely new alternative system of partnership recognition and rights. But as a Democrat, I believe in the principle that everyone should be equal before the law. That if a law exists for marriage, no one should be excluded, including not on the grounds of sexual orientation or gender identity. Moreover, as a campaign against homophobia, quite clearly the ban on same-sex marriage is a form of discrimination. It's saying that gay people, because of their sexuality, or trans people because of their gender identity, are not allowed to be part of this institution. And that is discrimination. So if you're a campaigner against anti-LGBT discrimination, then I think you have to oppose the ban on same-sex marriage, even if you personally may not wish to get married, and even if you personally critique the institution.
You've lived in Britain since the early 1970s. To what extent have you been following the marriage equality debate in Australia?
I've been following the debate in Australia very closely and with much admiration. I think the Australian marriage equality campaign is the best in the world, the best ever. I mean, it is so professional, so well organised. If there'd been any rationality or justice, they would have won years ago. But to me, it is the template for the campaign to get equal marriage. The way in which they've gone about it in terms of political engagement, in terms of involving community organisations, is a model for the rest of the world. So I really salute the campaigners from Australian Marriage Equality, and just share their frustration that despite all their clever, imaginative, creative tactics, because of a very, very ignorant and bigoted Prime Minister, they still haven't won.
You've mentioned the ignorant and bigoted Prime Minister Tony Abbott, quote unquote. Why do you think Australia then has been so slow to adopt marriage equality? Is it just down to him?
Well, of course, his predecessor, the Labour Prime Ministers, the two previous Labour Prime Ministers, they also at the time did not support same-sex marriage. And they could have legislated it, but they didn't. They blocked it too. So Tony Abbott isn't the only villain, but he's the current villain. I think really his opposition is really, really strange. I can't for the life of me figure out what is driving his opposition. Given the overwhelming public support in Australia for same-sex marriage, why is he so adamantly against? I think there's something in his own psychology or perhaps his own sexuality which has, driven this, because, on a rational level, why on earth would he oppose it when it's a policy that has majority support? In fact, more support than lots of other policies which he has sought to implement.
One of the things I've come across in a couple of the interviews, a few of them in fact, are people who oppose Tony Abbott's view on marriage equality and support marriage equality, but they say they respect his opinion, including his sister Christine Abbott, who I spoke to. How do you feel about that, respecting somebody's opinion on marriage equality, even though they oppose it?
Well, I respect all people, but I don't respect all opinions. And that's an important distinction. I can't respect Tony Abbott's opinion because it's a bigoted, homophobic, discriminatory opinion. He is endorsing legal discrimination against a section of Australian society, and that does not deserve respect. It deserves disrespect and condemnation.
You were very much involved in the campaign for marriage equality in England and Wales about 2 years ago. Have you seen any similarity or differences between the two campaigns of Australia and over here?
Well, the first thing, as I said, the Australian campaign has been much more professional, creative, imaginative, and sustained. But I think the basic core principles are very, very similar. It's about the principle of ending homophobic discrimination and ensuring equality before the law. Those are the core principles that have underpinned both campaigns in England and Wales and in Australia. And I think, we are going with the tide of history. Those who opposed same-sex marriage, they are the dinosaurs holding on to the prejudices and discrimination of the past. They won't win. They haven't won in England and Wales, and they eventually will not win in Australia either.
You touched upon it at the beginning. What do you say to those LGBTQIA liberationists who oppose marriage equality, not on the grounds of religion, but because they see it as aping heterosexuality or even selling out or even buying into a patriarchal institution?
I can understand and have a great deal of sympathy for that perspective. And I've written many times, my personal critique of marriage as an institution and why I wouldn't want to be part of it. And an aspect of my critique is that it is about aping and, pandering to what is fundamentally a heterosexually rooted institution. But as I said, because I'm a Democrat, because I'm a campaigner against homophobic discrimination, I feel obliged to support the principle of marriage equality, and I want to see it legislated so that everyone has a choice. It's not up to me to dictate, that would not be a libertarian or liberal position, but I think also we need to look to a system of relationship recognition that goes beyond marriage. So, for example, what I've called a civil commitment pact, which is the name, seeks to go beyond both marriage, same-sex or opposite sex, and beyond civil partnerships or civil unions, which are essentially marriage light. My civil commitment pact would allow any person to nominate any other person as their significant other and to designate them as next of kin and beneficiary in terms of inheritance. So this gets away from the idea that only couples can have these, particularly the protections and the advantages of inheritance tax relief. I think that should be applied to single people, and they should be able to nominate other people. It might be a partner, or it could be a lifelong best friend, a favourite niece or nephew. And then the other dimension of what I proposed is that people ought to be able to pick a mix from a menu of rights and responsibilities. Both marriage and civil partnerships are a one-size-fits-all. That doesn't take into account the huge diversity of lifestyles and relationships. Some partners live together, others live apart. Some share their finances, others maintain financial independence. Some have children, some don't. So under my system, each couple will be able to pick and mix from a menu of rights and responsibilities to create a partnership agreement tailored to their particular needs. So that would be also, I think, very good in the sense that with marriage and civil partnerships, you just sign the document. There's no negotiation. But with this system, you have to negotiate each particular aspect of rights and responsibilities and mutually agree them. And that might actually make for wiser, more careful, considered judgments about whether you really want to get into this formal recognition of your relationship.
Because that covers very much my next question, which was about some arguments that say it entrenches the divide between married couples and unmarried couples who have been together. You might get a couple that have been married only for a month but have only been together maybe 3 months, and you might get couples who've been together 10 years and never felt the need to get married. Do you have any concerns that the focus on marriage equality almost ignores those couples who choose to be unmarried and almost pressurizes couples to get married?
Well, I think there's an interesting dilemma here. On the one hand, I would like to see couples who are cohabiting and have been in a long-term relationship to have rights and responsibilities. Because in the event the relationship breaks down, the partners have no legal framework. Of course, they could drop their own contract, which is valid in some countries. But I don't agree with the idea of making cohabiting couples automatically have mandated rights and responsibilities, because that's forcing them into a legal framework they have not chosen. Now, I agree that is still a bit of a problem, because it leaves, couples who've been together a long time unprotected, but they've made that choice. I think they should have a right to make that choice. And I very much disagree with pressure here in Britain, for example, to require cohabiting couples by law to have the same rights as married and civilly partnered couples. I think that is an encroachment upon their autonomy and their freedom of choice.
How do you reassure people who perhaps oppose marriage equality on the grounds of, say, religion, culture or tradition?
I don't think religion, culture or tradition trump human rights. In a democratic free society where there is respect for human rights, we say that everyone is entitled to those rights and responsibilities, that there are no exceptions or exemptions. And once you start giving exemptions, then where do you stop? It opens a Pandora's box. People of faith are entitled to their personal view. I'm very disappointed if they believe that marriage equality is wrong or sinful, but they're entitled to that point of view. What they don't have an entitlement is to insist that because they hold that view, they should be able to enforce it upon everyone else. That because they oppose marriage equality should be denied to the rest of society. So to me, it's about a separation between religion and the state and the law. Those three things should be kept separate.
What's happened in Ireland has provided momentum with the marriage equality referendum there. Recently, despite dismissing it earlier, Tony Abbott's talked about a possible plebiscite and others about a referendum. What are your views on a plebiscite or referendum on marriage equality?
Well, I wouldn't object to a referendum on marriage equality in principle, but quite clearly, Tony Abbott is using it as an obstructive and delaying tactic. We do have legislatures, like the House of Representatives and the Senate in Australia, which are mandated to pass laws and to repeal discriminatory laws. So you could argue, well, why do we need a referendum? Lots of issues have never had a referendum or ever even been proposed for a referendum. Why should this one be singled out? It is an issue of equality and human rights. I think it's pretty non-controversial. It's very simple. If you don't like same-sex marriage, don't marry a person of the same sex. End of story.
To what extent do you have concerns that there's been so much focus on marriage equality that other LGBTQIA issues have been forgotten, such as the detention of asylum seekers in Australia and, say, trans issues? Where do you stand on that?
I think you're right. To some extent, marriage equality has taken over all the other unfinished business in terms of LGBTI equality. And so in that sense, it's a bit negative. But on the other hand, this is an important equality issue. A lot of people believe it's important to them to have the right to marry the person they love. I understand that. I support that. But I think at the same time, we should not forget these other issues. I don't actually think it's in a case of being mutually exclusive. We can or should battle for marriage equality, but also for the other issues that are still unresolved.
What do you think the timeline is for marriage equality in Australia?
Well, I would have said even 2 or 3 years ago, it's bound to happen very soon, but sadly not. If Tony Abbott goes for a referendum, then that will delay it further, unless they manage to get a vote in Parliament where disaffected Liberal supporters decide to defy the party whip. That may indeed end up with a situation where marriage equality comes sooner. I would hope that, I would expect that, but given all the delays so far, I'm not entirely convinced.
What do you think are the best ways for people to get involved in the campaign for marriage equality?
Well, obviously, supporting the initiatives of Australia Marriage Equality. They've got it all set out very well, very coordinated. The standard thing, of course, is to write to your member of the House of Representatives and Senate, write to other friends and family and get them to write as well, and keep on supporting protests and email campaigns and petitions to show and to prove that there is a real groundswell of support. Also, of course, tell your personal stories. Tell the story why you believe that marriage equality is important to you. Because I think that human interest, that personal story is so important and persuasive. When people hear the often heartbreaking stories of the consequences of not having equal marriage, it often motivates them to rethink their position.
You've praised, this is my final question, you've praised the Australian Marriage Equality campaign. Is there any advice that you would give them? Or do you think they're on the ball?
I think they're totally on the ball. I think everybody around the world can learn from them. And I salute AME, all those who've supported alongside them. It's been a fantastic, brilliant, inspiring campaign. Well done. You will win in the end.
Peter Tatchell, thank you very much.
Thank you.